white power structure because that's all we have in America. And the white power structure today is just as much interested in perpetuating slavery as the white power structure was 100 years ago. Only now they use modern methods of doing so. And realizing that the black people in this country are waking up and becoming filled with a desire to be looked upon as men and as human beings. The white power structure to slow down that struggle for freedom and human dignity uses tricks. 100 years ago they could do it with chains. Today they use tricks. And one of the tricks that they've invented is this token integration. To get Negroes, so-called Negro leaders, to accept a few token crumbs of integration that don't solve any problem for the masses of black people in this country whatsoever, but it does make the hand-picked Negroes be satisfied to slow down the cry of the masses. And a good example of that is as soon as the spirit of rebellion or revolution began to spread among the masses of black people in this country, and they began to take an active part, and they showed that they weren't confined to this nonviolent approach, then the government or the power structure began to sit up and take notice and
Uhuru Nakaribu and Dugu Nadada. Freedom and welcome, brothers and sisters. I'm Ikemba Ojore, and I represent We Charge Colonialism and the Claim Malcolm X Day Committee, also known as CMXD. As we approach the 100th anniversary of the birth of the Honorable Malcolm X in 2025, we are gearing up for the 10th annual Malcolm X Day Festival in Philadelphia. Get ready for an immersive experience as we delve into Malcolm X's life, his powerful impact, and the legacy he left behind. In the lead up to the festival, we'll be sharing thought-provoking commentary, stirring speeches, poignant letters, insightful writings, and engaging programs focused on the life of the great Malcolm X. Our goal at CMXD is to carry forward the mission that was left incomplete after Malcolm X's untimely passing, and your support is invaluable in this journey. Join us in this meaningful commemoration by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. And your active participation is what makes this all possible. And we truly appreciate your contribution. So together, let's embark on this journey towards this momentous Malcolm X Day 100 celebration. Make sure that you follow CMXD Philly on all social media platforms to stay updated. Now sit back and enjoy.
African Americans, who are so-called Negro. One of the reasons that it is bad for us to continue to just refer to ourselves as so-called Negro, that's negative. When we say so-called Negro, that's pointing out what we aren't, but it isn't telling us what we are. We are African, and we happen to be in America. We're not American. We are people who formerly were Africans who were kidnapped and brought to America. Our forefathers weren't the Pilgrims. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock was landed on us. We were brought here against our will. We were not brought here to be made citizens. We were not brought here to enjoy the constitutional gifts that they speak so beautifully about today. And because we weren't brought here to be made citizens today, now that we've become awakened to some degree and we begin to ask for those things which they say are supposedly for Americans, they look upon us with hostility and unfriendliness. So our unwanted presence, the fact that we are unwanted, is becoming magnified in all of America's preachments today. In the United Nations, you have poor nations and rich nations. They say that the most powerful bloc in the UN are the African Asian bloc. These are the poor nations. Yet they carry more weight in this political body than the nations do who have all the money. Why? Because no matter how wealthy America is, she only has one vote. No matter how wealthy Russia is, she only has one vote. Whereas all the poor nations in Africa who have just emerged into independence, they have each a vote too. And they stick together and are able to outmaneuver the rich nations. This is by having independence and the right to vote in the political world body, it has enabled the dark nations to band together and use the strength of their ballot to force the wealthy nations, which are the white nations, into giving more independence to other nations who are still under their jurisdiction. You and I have to look at this and understand this, that the ballot is as powerful as the bullet. Now, if you and I leave it up to the moderate Negro leaders, they'll be able to trick it up and make the world think that they passed something that doesn't really mean anything. So what you and I have got to do is get involved. You and I have to be right there breathing down their throat. Every time they look over their shoulder, we want them to see us. We want to make them pass the strongest civil rights bill they've ever passed. Because we know even after they pass it, they can't enforce it. In order to do this, we're starting a voters registration drive. We have to get everybody in Harlem registered. Not as Democrats or Republicans, but registered as independents. We're going to organize a corps of brothers and sisters who, after the city is mapped out, they won't leave one apartment house door not knocked on. There won't be a door in Harlem that will not have been knocked on to see that whatever black face lives behind that door is registered to vote by a certain time this year. Nobody will have an excuse not to be registered. We'll ask him, let us see your card. If you don't have the sense of responsibility to get registered, we'll move you out of town. It's going to be the ballot or the bullet. After we get our people registered, we can then organize that voting strength and channel it in the direction that will get immediate results for the benefit of our people. We can sweep our enemies right out of office, but we will not be able to do it sitting around talking about select and elect your own candidates.
Hey, peace, Uhuru family. That was the Honorable Malcolm X dropping jewels as usual. Definitely appreciate that clip. Always inspiring. Listening to Malcolm X is reinvigorating, especially with so much going on and just day in and day out dealing with colonialism and the contradictions that come from colonialism. Colonialism itself, is a contradiction, and it creates so many other contradictions within society, between the workers, between within the education system, within the labor force, just all aspects of society, just creating this division between those who have and those who don't have, or those who are of a certain complexion, right? Those who divisions between gender, divisions between levels of education, levels of access to resources, right? What resources you have. And so, colonialism constantly creates this divide within society in order for the ruling class really to maintain their position of power. They have to keep creating these divisions among the people. Because at the end of the day, it's all about who controls the resources, right? When we get caught up in sort of like these ideological battles, intellectual disputes, arguments over things that's abstract, those things keep us from really gaining access or control over what really matters, which is the material resources, because that is how we survive, to be able to feed ourselves, clothe ourselves, right, and to give ourselves shelter. So, with that being said, man, Malcolm, is really dropping it in here. I appreciate the beginning of this particular speech that he's given when he's speaking about identity and us as African people who go by many identities. Some say we're Black, some say Black American, some say African American. Then you have Afro Latinos, Black Brits, right? Jamaicans, Haitians, all of these different identities that we do have. But Malcolm right here is going back to his Marcus Garvey roots and stating that, we are African. We are African people, and understanding that continuity of that Africans today have with our African ancestors that were on the continent, those who remain on the continent and those who were taken from the continent and brought to the Americas and enslaved and colonized. And he speaks to the irony of the formerly enslaved, still colonized Africans identifying with their slave master. It's ironic for the enslaved to want to identify with the slave master. It's ironic for the colonized to want to identify themselves with the colonizer. And this is what has happened. And I think in order for, in order for the colonizer to maintain its position of control and rule over the masses of people, it has to get them to identify with the colonizer and its system, right? It has to unite with the colonizer and the colonizer system. This is to prevent a rebellion, a revolt. So this is where we are. And Malcolm, he's speaking to this. I think, when we think about those who identify as an American, and they have they have reason and rationale. I was going to say good, but they have reason and rationale for wanting to identify with the colonizer. And they argue about their contribution or participation in the development and building of America. But let's put it another way, their contribution and participation in the development of the American empire. And when we look at it as an empire, an imperialist state, it shouldn't be something that we aspire to be a part of. And then we also have to understand when we're talking about America, we're not necessarily talking about a landmass. We're really talking about an entity that was created, right? A social construct that was created, an institution that was created by the Western imperialists. And so, and that's all of these sort of these states and countries that make up the Americas. When we look at it, these were creations of the colonizer. And so when we understand that you can't separate the name of the landmass from the social group, right? Because the landmass by itself doesn't have a name. It doesn't have an identity. It is given its identity from the social group, the occupiers of the land, or those who have control, not necessarily occupying the land, but those who have control and power over the land and the power to define the land. which the colonizers have been able to do. So when we understand that, we can appreciate our reason for wanting to create something new, a new identity, right? Or even reconnecting with old identities and culture and traditions and building upon those. So Malcolm understood that then, and hopefully more Africans in the diaspora will come to that understanding. The other thing, though, I want to point to is Malcolm was talking about this block, this African block that can be created to within the United Nations to sort of influence or push the Western powers to move in the direction of granting the freedom and liberties to the oppressed and exploited Africans on the continent. And this happened in a sense. There was some concessions that was made, but I think if Malcolm would have been around and also been exposed to Kwame Nkrumah's neo-colonialism, the highest stage of imperialism, then Malcolm would have saw that even the gains in Africa was going to be short-lived. It's not that Malcolm didn't understand neo-colonialism, because he even talks about it in this discussion, in this speech, when he talks about the moderate Negro, right? So he goes from talking about the international politics, and then he localizes his discussion when he's talking about voting. But we can look at international politics and local. We can look at strategy and contradiction. We can look at the contradictions, and we can look at what strategies are needed for both, because they parallel each other. And so when we look at the moderate Negro that Malcolm is talking about and what needs to be done to check the moderate Negro, he talks about the necessity of us being organized, the masses being organized, and putting the pressure on those who are in positions of leadership, right? Who really, for the problem that we're dealing with now, they really align themselves with white power. They align themselves with the colonizer. They fight for concessions, but they're not ready or prepared to do anything that will jeopardize their position in power. And so it's going to take for the masses of Africans to organize and to be breathing down their neck, right? And letting them know, hey, this is what we are looking for as African people. This is what we're looking for in our leadership. This is what you need to be doing if you're going to be representing us, right? And, the problem is that we have left the leadership, the so-called leadership, on an island to make these decisions on their own. And I think, it sort of has gone to the head. We have created a tradition of really leadership that feels as though that they don't have to be held accountable, because we haven't been holding them accountable. Who are we to criticize them, right? We should be grateful that they're in this position of power and are able to make decisions on behalf of us, whether we like the decisions or not. Shut up, and be grateful that this Black person here. But those days have to be over. And so Malcolm is really speaking to us getting organized, utilize, weaponizing the vote, not registering Democrat or Republican. And this is a call that I'm going to start making, being more loud and vocal on, is the need for us to make this exodus from the Democrat and Republican Party and form a new party, to form, if we're going to remain, the majority of us remain Democrat, to form a sort of a organization or section within the Democratic Party that represents the Black interests. We may think we have those already, but we don't. Not someone that represents really a Black agenda. And so I gotta appreciate this. I think the movement was deferred with the assassination of Malcolm. There was so much that he was attempting to do and just didn't have the time to do it, and there wasn't anyone to pick up the mantle of the Organization of Afro-American Unity to keep it going, even though they attempted to. But we would see the rise of other radical organizations, such as the Black Panther Party, Republican New Africa, and so forth, to try to carry out the program of Malcolm X. So I'm going to bring this to a close. Again, appreciate everybody for tapping in. Make sure that you subscribe to CMXD Philly on YouTube, CMXD Philly on YouTube, that you follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. Stay tapped in. If you're in Philadelphia, look out for those programs and the festival that's going to be coming up in 2025. And if you're not, make sure that you book your tickets or reserve your rentals and get to the city of Philadelphia, because it's going down for CMXD Claim Malcolm X Day Philly 100-year anniversary commemoration of the birth of Malcolm X. Until next time, Uhuru and Black Power.